Hello folks, Belfast ex-pro fighter and boxing historian Eamon McAuley here, back with another wee chat about boxing. This is probably my last talk. I'm here today to talk about great boxing comebacks, my top 10. So we'll go straight into it. Number 10, greatest boxing comeback, Carlos Palomino. Carlos Palomino from Mexico was a former world welterweight champion who made 7 title defences of his title before losing it in controversial circumstances in Puerto Rico to Wilfred Benitez. I have watched this fight many times and I thought Palomino deserved a verdict. In his next fight, Palomino met Roberto Giron, who had just moved up to welterweight. Palomino lost to Giron by decision and he announced his retirement from boxing. This was 1979. 18 years later, Carlos decided to make a comeback. It began by beating Ismael Diaz by knockout in 9 rounds. He won 4 fights that year, including a win over former world champion Rene Arredondo. But when Palomino lost by decision to world title challenger Wilfredo Rivera on May 30th, 1998, he retired for good. Palomino has stayed retired ever since. He is 75 now. He was also an actor and featured in several television shows and films. He has also done commentary on big US TV fights. Number 9, greatest boxing comebacks, Vitaly Klitschko. Ukraine's Dr. Iron Fist Vitaly Klitschko retired with just 2 losses and 47 fights. The 2 losses were against Chris Bird and Lennox Lewis, and they were injury losses, while he was ahead on the scorecards. He was never knocked out or never knocked down in his boxing career. He retired in 2004 after stopping Danny Williams. But he returned 4 years later at the age of 37. Vitaly made 12 successful defences of his world heavyweight title and retired unbeaten champ. From 2006 to 2015, Vitaly and his brother Vladimir dominated heavyweight boxing. The Klitschko era, it was called. Vitaly was 42 when he retired. He entered politics and was the mayor of Kiev. Number 8, greatest comeback of all time, Larry Holmes. After retiring from boxing in 1988, with a record of 48 wins and just 3 defeats, Larry Holmes had just been knocked out by Mike Tyson in 4 rounds, and it was time to say goodbye to boxing, or so we thought. But no, Holmes, who had made millions from the sport as well as 20 title defences, returned after a 3-year break. Few paid attention. He turned in a remarkable performance to beat Olympic gold medalist and unbeaten pro Ray Mercer in February 1992. He then lost a title shot against undisputed heavyweight champ Evander Holyfield in June of that year, but once again looked impressive as Holyfield had to work hard for his win. So Holmes boxed on and he challenged Oliver McCall for the WBC title. McCall was making his first defence after knocking out Lennox Lewis. Larry pushed McCall all the way, with McCall squeaking out a wafer-thin decision. It was very tight. Holmes boxed on for another decade before ending his comeback from 1991 with a 23 win and 3 loss record, with defeats coming against Holyfield and McCall and a split decision loss to Brian Nelson in Denmark. Holmes enjoyed wins against the likes of Jose Ribalta, Jesse Ferguson, Morris Harris, Bone Crusher Smith in a rematch, and a fierce knockout win in a rematch with Mike Weaver, also Butterbean. Holmes was really enjoying his boxing, and he was never as popular. Larry Holmes finally retired, aged 52. Still alive and well. Number 7, greatest comeback, Roberto Giron. Roberto Giron had 2 great comebacks in his boxing career. After beating Sugar Ray Leonard to win the welterweight crown in a thrilling fight in 1980 in Canada, Giron gave Leonard a rematch a couple of months later in New Orleans. Giron had been partying since the first fight and had put quite a bit of weight on. He did not give himself enough time to take the weight off, or so the story goes. Leonard changed tactics for the rematch, choosing the boxing move rather than stand and fight, as he did in the first fight. Giron made the weight, but gorged himself with food after the weigh-in, claiming he had a hot steak with a glass of cold water. As the fight progressed, Leonard was boxing rings around Giron as Roberto started to get frustrated, as he couldn't land anything on Sugar Ray. In the 7th round, Leonard started to show off as he made Giron look foolish, with hands of stone lunged amateurishly at Leonard, who done the alley shuffle and wound up a bolo punch with his right, only to hit Giron with his left. At the end of the round, Giron was shaking his head as he went to the corner. I think he had made up his mind then to quit. Halfway through the 8th round, Giron walked to his corner, shaking his head again. No one knew what was going on as the referee told him to box on, but Giron had had enough and refused to box on. And explicitly, he had quit. The outcry around the world was huge. His own Panamanian countrymen turned against him. Tens of thousands were at the airport when he returned after the first Leonard fight. But this time he didn't return to Panama. He was exiled in Florida. He couldn't come home. He was too scared to come home. He had disgraced himself and his country. The only way Giron could redeem himself was to make Panamanians proud again. Giron embarked on a comeback. And after a couple of dodgy losses against Benitez and Britain's Kirkland Lang, he won a fight against washed up Jose Pepino Cuevas. And he was awarded a shot at the light middleweight title, or as the Yanks call it, the super welterweight title, against unbeaten American Davey Moore. Giron was sensational, hammering Moore in 8 one-sided rounds. Montes de Piedro was world champion again. The president of Panama sent a private plane to bring Giron back to Panama, where thousands waited on his arrival at the airport. Some months later, Giron signed to fight fearsome middleweight Marvin Hagler. The Ring magazine asked 50 boxing experts who would win, and not one picked Giron. Giron, who had the body of a lightweight, surely couldn't compete against a guy who had wiped out the middleweight division. Anyway, Giron lost a close decision against Hagler, but the headlines the next day were, Hagler wins the fight, but Giron wins the night. Hagler was made to look ordinary and pedestrian against Roberto. To the Panamanians, it was like a win. And once again, he returned to Panama a hero. In his next fight, Giron was knocked cold by Tommy Hearns, but later Hearns was knocked out by Aaron the Blade Barkley. Somehow Giron had worked his way up the middleweight rankings, and Barkley gave him a shot at the middleweight title. It looked like a mismatch as I stood waiting for the referee's instructions. Giron was 5'7" and Barkley was 6'1". Giron looked a bit podgy and Barkley looked hard as steel. Giron pulled off one of boxing's great upsets, winning a split decision, dropping Barkley in the 11th round to seal the win. Number 6, greatest comeback in boxing history, is Eddie Joffrey. Eddie Joffrey from Brazil only lost 2 fights in a 78-fight career. He also had 4 draws, all avenged. His 2 losses were in Japan against fighting Harada. Joffrey was thought to have done enough in the first fight, but he lost by controversial split decision. The rematch a year later resulted in Harada capturing a unanimous decision victory. Joffrey retired. 3 years later, Joffrey came back against Rudy Corona, winning by knockout in 6 rounds. After winning 13 fights in a row, he challenged for the world title once again. On May 5, 1973, he fought Jose Legra for the lineal and WBC featherweight title in Brasilia. Joffrey became a 2-division world champion by defeating Legra with a 15-round majority decision. What a comeback. I remember in the late 1990s getting footage of Eddie Joffrey's 2 fights with Harada. I brought them up to my friend and great rival of Eddie Joffrey's, Freddie Gilroy. And me and Freddie watched them in Freddie's living room, after which Freddie says, I would have knocked him out. Dead on, Freddie. The 5th greatest comeback in boxing history, in my opinion, would be Sugar Ray Leonard. Olympic gold medalist 1976, Ray Leonard turned pro and won the WBC welterweight title against Wilfred Benitez in 1979. He lost then 1 back-to-back fights with Roberto Giron, then won the light middleweight title against Ayub Kaluli, before dropping down to welterweight to unify the welterweight crown by beating the awesome Tommy Hearns in a classic fight. Leonard was found to have a detached retina and promptly retired. He came back for another fight in 1984, but was dropped against Kevin Hart. Leonard retired again. In 1986, Leonard sat ringside when Marvin Hagler boxed John McAuley. Leonard thought to himself, I can beat this guy, Hagler, and signed to fight Marvelous Marvin on April 1987. Leonard had had 1 fight in 5 years. He was a massive underdog going in. Leonard said, if I was a betting man, I would bet on Hagler, but if I was a smart man, I would bet on me. Leonard boxed a brilliant fight, and Hagler's game plan was terrible. Leonard was a deserved winner in my eyes. From the 5th till the end, it was a close fight, but Hagler lost the first 4 rounds, boxing as an orthodox boxer, although he was a southpaw. So I had Leonard the winner by 4 rounds. So this is my number 5 greatest upset. Number 4, Muhammad Ali. Cassius Clay would change his name to Muhammad Ali after beating Sonny Liston and winning the world title in 1964. In 1967, Ali refused induction into the US Army during the Vietnam War, citing his religious beliefs and opposition to the war. They took his heavyweight title away and banned him for 3.5 years. Ali was at his peak as a boxer. In a 4-year legal battle which resulted in the Supreme Court overturning the conviction, he made his boxing comeback. His comeback fight was against Jerry Quarry in Atlanta, Georgia. and it was October 1970, and Ali won after 3 rounds as Quarry was stopped with a cut to his eye. His next fight was in December 1970 against rugged Argentine Oscar Bonavena, and Ali looked rusty and sluggish, winning by knockout in the 15th round with an incredible left hook as Ali was going backwards. Then came the fight of the century against Joe Frazier, with 2 unbeaten heavyweight champions coming together. Somebody's O has got to go. Maybe Ali could have done with another couple of comeback fights, but Smoking Joe was magnificent, dropping Ali with a left hook in the 15th and final round to seal the win. Ali then strung together 10 wins, then faced unknown Ken Norton, who broke Ali's jaw, winning a 12-round decision. It was a massive setback for Ali. Ali rested for 6 months, then went in again against Norton without a tune-up fight. Ali won a razor-thin split decision against Norton, but it was very close. 2 fights later, Ali got revenge against the only other guy to beat him, Joe Frazier. Joe had lost his title as he was put down 6 times and stopped in 2 rounds by George Foreman. In his next fight, Foreman demolished Ken Norton in 2 rounds. Frazier and Norton had beat Ali, and although Ali avenged them defeats, close points wins, Foreman had demolished Frazier and Norton. No one gave Ali a chance against the champion Foreman, but in Kinshasa, Zaire, October 30th, 1974, nearly 7 years after being stripped of his heavyweight crown, Ali pulled off the most incredible win, knocking out Big George in the 8th round. Greatest comebacks in boxing history. In my opinion, the 3rd greatest comeback in boxing history was when George Foreman retired from boxing, or so we thought, in 1977 after his loss to Jimmy Young. George became an ordained Christian minister and was forgotten by the boxing public. Incredibly, in 1987, 10 years after he had retired, he made a comeback. George's comeback was seen as a joke by many, but he kept on winning and racked up 24 wins between 1987 and 1991. The only 2 boxers of any note that he had beat were Dwight Muhammad Cowie, who was a 5'7" former light heavyweight and cruiserweight champion, and former world title challenger Jerry Cooney. Foreman got his chance to box undisputed champ Evander Holyfield in 1991. Holyfield, who was in his prime, won a tough 12-round unanimous decision, but Foreman came out of the fight with a lot of credit. He gave it his all and rocked Holyfield several times. It was the perfect time for George to say goodbye, but George kept going and secured a fight with Tommy Morrison for the lightly regarded WBO belt. Morrison won a clear unanimous verdict, and the public wanted George to say goodbye to boxing. But George is very stubborn, as we all know. Then George got a gift of an opportunity against Michael Moore, who had took the undisputed, forget the WBO, title of Evander Holyfield. In 1984, at the age of 44, George regained the heavyweight title he lost 20 years previously to Muhammad Ali when he knocked out the first southpaw heavyweight champion ever in 10 rounds. George was a mile behind in points. Second greatest comeback in boxing history. Willie Pape. Willie Pape came back from surviving a plane crash which broke his back as well as his left leg. He broke 2 vertebrae in his back and was told his boxing career was over and he might not walk again. Despite the injuries from the plane crash which killed 2 people, he returned to boxing 6 months later, winning 10 fights in 1947. But many thought that Willie had lost something as a fighter. There was something missing. He struggled to a majority decision against Archie Wilmer and was decked by Pedro Biesca in 1948. He was knocked out in 4 rounds by Sandy Sadler. He boxed world champion Sadler again for the title in 1949 and he regained the world title with an outstanding display of pure boxing, probably his greatest display in his brilliant career. But the film of the fight doesn't exist no more, sadly. To come back from a broken back is really something. Number 1, greatest boxing comeback, in my opinion, has to be Harry Greb. Harry Greb was thumbed by the seriously tough black light heavyweight Kid Norfolk in 1921. The incident is believed to have resulted in a retinal tear, which eventually led to blindness in that eye. Greb still won the fight and would score many of his best wins blind in one eye, and he was going blind in the other eye too. He had wins against Gene Tunney, Tommy Gibbons, Tommy Loughran, winning the middleweight title against Johnny Wilson, Tiger Flowers, light heavyweight Jimmy Delaney, Mickey Walker, and many more, blind in one eye. In 1926, when Greb retired, he had a glass eye inserted. So, greatest comeback, to come back from being blind in one eye, while the other sight in the other eye fading, and to beat them great fighters, has to be the greatest boxing comeback of all time. I just want to announce my retirement from boxing and from doing these talks. I never announced my retirement from boxing, but at 60 now, it's hardly likely that I will ever make a comeback. So it's goodbye from me, and you will never see me in a boxing ring again. I'm also done with the boxing talks on YouTube. I have done all I can and covered every aspect of boxing, but I have lost my passion for boxing today. I have made my opinions on this well known. All my talks have been my views and my opinions. I write them down and I read them out. I have never copied anybody, unlike some. I'm a boxing expert and historian and former fighter. Boxing runs through my blood. My granddad was a professional champion and my uncle was world flyweight champion. There are people doing boxing talks who never boxed in their life, but that's okay. I have done well over 100 talks this year, nearly all boxing, but not all. I got over 10,000 views when I talked about the Shankill Butchers. I got over 3,000 views when I talked about my dad. I got over 10,000 views for Tyson Fury and Joe Egan in videos I posted of them boxing. So for the last time, take care, God bless, and I won't see you soon.